Welcome back to Honest Voice. I'm Todd.
I'm Carolsue. So today we're doing something a little bit different. We're actually stepping in between two episodes about anger to talk about something that really has to be out on the table before we go any further. And today we're going to talk about lies that are told out of kindness.
Yeah, one of the things that we were thinking about when we were talking about anger last week is that we started off with like the normal physical responses of anger, how we perceive it, how we react, how those things were basically put on us at an earlier age and just reinforced and adapted over time. And we decided that before we get into the delicate information actually about anger, because some of it is going to make people angry, we decided that we wanted to go ahead and wedge in a little bit of information on basically where Honest Voice really came from. But we're going to talk about, in reverse, we're going to talk about lying. And it's a two-part series. Today we're going to talk more about, how the lies came about and how we don't even really know that we are lying in some cases or why we do it. And then it becomes a norm. And lying socially is very normal, more so than you're aware of. I do want to stress that one of the things that we push all the time is that this is just data.
Yeah.
From our point of view, words should not provoke anger. Like I said, of course, it's not very professional and not very technical, but someone calling you a poopy head is considered an insult. But you can substitute any words in for poopy head, and when you really look at it, it's sort of silly. If somebody says something, we get angry. A lot of times what we're getting angry about is the way we feel about those words towards ourselves. It's not about them, it's about what we think inside that means.
What it provokes for us inside.
Exactly.
Yeah. And in a lot of cases, the lies we're talking about here were created in kindness. It's not that we are seeking to give somebody false information, but we're trying to deliver tough information a little more gently. We don't want to scare someone, we don't want to hurt somebody, and we don't want to fight. So we find a way to deliver different information that isn't completely accurate, still a lie, because we're trying to preserve the relationship, but we don't realize that there is a cost to that through the course of that relationship.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. We want to be very, very clear. We're not a provocative show. We're not here to try to stir anything up or fight the machine or whatever you want to call it. We want to identify that most of the dishonesty that was created, it's not malicious. It's basically a skill substitute. We're substituting what I would have to call our ability to cope with a situation or maybe provoke a situation in that moment because of how somebody else might take it. And we're learning a skill to try to reduce that. We're trying to sometimes overcompensate for other people's discomfort. We want to make them comfortable. So we're like, oh no, that's just fine. I'm okay with that.
Yes.
Really, you're like, oh, I'm going to go crazy. This keeps happening.
Yeah. So a quick example before we get further into it. Think about the last time that someone came up to you and said, oh, hey, how does this outfit look on me? And maybe you didn't think it was the most complimentary outfit, but either the person means a lot to you or the moment's not right, so you're not ready to tell the whole truth about that. And so instead you just say, yeah, no, that's great.
And no, that's a really good point that you brought up also, because that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about these social lies that we tell in two directions, because one, when a person says, how does this look? Are they really asking for that input? Or do they just want you to say, yes, it looks great, even when it doesn't?
Do they want the truth, or do they just want validation?
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. And that's all part of our programming as well. If we ask a question, we should want the truth, no matter what those truths are. Like, no, that makes you look like a crazy person or whatever you want to call it. But hey, just, in case you get stuck in this situation, I have a very good skill for this one. When someone comes out and says, hey, how does this look on me? And luckily you don't do that to me. You just, well, I mean, sometimes you'll ask, but in our relationship, you like the honesty.
I do.
So so we're sort of programmed for that. We're not a good example when it comes to that. But when it started out, the one thing that I would always keep in mind is I would avoid the question like, hey, how does this dress look on me? And this isn't manipulative. So you're like, oh, that's what you were doing back then. How does this dress look on me? And say it's a red dress or something like that. And Carolsue would come out and say, hey, how does this dress look on me? I would say, I think the blue one looks better than that one. So I would contrast it with something positive to, I know it's getting out of actually answering the question in those cases, but that's exactly what we're talking about. And that was at the beginning of the relationship. And now we've gotten to the point where it's like, well, that really doesn't look good on you. There's certain things that I don't like Like, I don't like things touching my neck, like this shirt is right now,
Or certain fabrics.
or certain fabrics, things like that.
And it's also been a running joke / truth in our house that a lot of the things that I wear are a little, frumpy's not a good word, but
No.
we talk about the grandma sweater.
Yeah, I would just ask, was that passed down in your family
Right.
through the ages?
From the Victorian era.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because I have like a potato sack that might look better actually than that. No, I wouldn't say that. I'm wondering how much we'll keep in there.
It's good to have it, though.
So those are just really good examples of how they're normal lies. They come from a good place. We don't want to hurt each other's feelings. We don't want to say something that will upset us. But the flip side of that is that we press is that there shouldn't be any feelings to be hurt. If you want data, if you want actual information, if you want to be actually concerned about how another person's opinion is on something you're wearing before you go out in public and other people see it, then that should be the question that you're asking. Do you think this looks nice on me? And ask for tangible feedback. It's one of those things where we always say our advice is freely given, freely ignored. So that goes in both directions. If I say, hey, I don't really think that looks as good on you as the blue dress. But also be comfortable with the fact that, well, I'm going to wear it anyways. Great. You got my input. It was disregarded because you have a different opinion than that. And that's fine also. And I'm not in the mode of, well, what are you even asking me for? I mean, that's exactly what we want to do with our loved ones is we want to get that input. We want to get that, how they feel about it, because that's how we learn about each other. So what normally society would call a failed input, it was just different data. And now that we've looked at these points, I've made my decision free of any kind of pressure. And this is what we're going to do.
Yeah. So when we make the choice in the moment to give a small white lie as an answer, we think we're avoiding a harder conversation, but really at most what we're doing is delaying that, because especially with relationships that go on for months or years, these are probably topics that you're avoiding because they're uncomfortable. So inevitably you'll probably have to address them at some point for the health of the relationship. So we just want to help you get more comfortable with identifying where we make these choices and what some better choices might be.
Right. So this episode is basically trying to interrupt these kind of situations that become a full-blown conflict in some relationships. And we want to try to give you some skills to make this easier.
Yeah.
And then we're going to elevate this. We're going to get into some deeper stuff later, but we're setting the foundation. And this is what we've been doing all along. If you're looking at our catalog, we are building you up to be what we call in our first book, Finding Your Honest Voice. What we call the super person. And this is an individual that is unflappable. Do you like this? No, I don't like it at all. Okay, thanks for your input. Okay, I will move on now. That's, I mean, it sounds robotic, but what really happened here was there was no negative emotional response to this exchange. So we're not telling you to be robots, but when you really think about it, a lot of our reactions are indirect manipulation of another person. It's like in this moment, if I tell Carolsue that, I'm not really fond of that particular dress, and she's like, well, what's wrong with it? That's immediately telling me something that she doesn't like my opinion, and she's now irritated with me.
And I probably don't actually want the answer to that next question I just asked you.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very good point, too. That's not really what you want to hear. And I would say, I'm sorry, I was actually blinded for a moment and didn't get a very good look at it. Let me look at it now. Oh, you know what? Now that I think about it, it looks much better.
You wanted me to open my eyes before I gave you an opinion on that shirt. Sorry. Totally great.
How does this dress look? I went, it looks, I like the blue one better. So that's not what we're saying. What we've done is we've designed basically these 4 basic categories of lies. We call them buckets when we were putting them together. So our first bucket is like these small daily lies.
Yes. And we don't even think about these lies when we tell them. Let's say that you're heading out for the day. All you want to do is go home and relax on your couch. And a friend or coworker says, hey, we're going to go out and have a couple of beers. Do you want to join us? And you like these people, but you really don't want to do that. So instead of just saying, man, I'm exhausted, then you go, oh, my dog has a vet appointment at 6 p.m., so I got to get out of here. Because you're trying to preserve feelings, but you've just had to invent something and told a lie where you could have just said, oh, I'm exhausted.
Yeah, and most likely you have been programmed by the individuals that you're interacting with as well. And you know that in these cases that your response, your decline or your cancellation or whatever is going to be met with some hurt feelings on that end. So we promote these lies. When you have somebody that you say, I don't feel like it tonight, I want to get some sleep, and they're like, you can sleep when you're dead, one of those kind of people that can just party all night, and That's exhausting at my age. I couldn't even think about staying up later than 9 o'clock. No, it's not
Respect.
that bad. Yeah.
Respect.
It's pretty close though.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But those kind of things just, they're not as fun as they used to be, and we evolve over time. But the main thing that I'm getting at is that that person probably gets irritated or frustrated, or they feel hurt if you're not part of that group, and they will put that on you. They will make you, once again, like we keep saying, they will make you feel bad for your decision. And this is why we come up with these lies. We want to maintain status quo. Once again, they come from a very kind place. I don't want to hurt your feelings, so I'm going to have to say it this way. But we really believe at Honest Voice that this has become almost the catalyst for most of our problems in our social climate right now. Is that we are not being honest, but we are also not allowed to be honest. So this is where we're trying to change that. Another one of those examples is like when somebody gives you a gift and you're like, oh, this was great. And you've got like 5 of these in the closet right now, or you no longer use those kind of things and you want to soften it. And it shouldn't be that way because, as we say, we should be learning each other, but also there's a lot of different variables when it comes to gift giving. And one of those things is it was a kind gesture. You know, thank you very much for that particular gift, you know, even if it wasn't the best thing. But we also, even around that, will be like, I'm going to use this, I'm going to put it right here, you know.
I'm glad you separated that out, because you're right. The gift giver is trying to give a gesture to prove they care about you and they know you. And so you're looking at them and they're anticipating your response. And we're not suggesting that in the moment you go, oh, socks, awesome.
Yes, exactly.
But as Todd was saying, we don't want to add on and go, oh man, I love socks with guinea pigs all over them. I want you to buy me 20 more pairs. Yeah.
If you spend at least 5 of your Christmases as a child saying, oh, socks, that'll be reflective. You know, that'd be something to reflect on.
Yeah. And another one that we see every single day in every context is, I'm fine.
Yeah, and we've already talked about that because that's part of when we talked about breaking the silence.
Yes.
A lot of times we'll say we're fine. So that's another great example that falls right into this one, that we've already given you some cool skills to prevent that kind of interaction.
Yeah. So for us, what we want to really focus on is the fact that these things all seem harmless. Well, what's the big deal about telling her sweater looks nice even if it doesn't? They feel harmless because they're so common. And unfortunately, what we know is that the more you practice at something, whether it's good or bad, the more second nature it becomes. And before you know it, you lose the ability to feel comfortable being honest at all.
Yeah.
And that's the habit that we're trying to break here.
So like we said before, honesty without kindness is cruel. And of course, kindness without honesty, we've called performance.
That's right.
Because it's not honest. It is fake. It's a performance. It's just like an actor. I am putting on a show for you because of all of these parameters that we've already discussed.
It's superficial. It doesn't help the relationship grow. It doesn't help people get closer to each other. It's just checking a block.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just like declining from a request to go out or an invitation in some capacity, that's just, you know, hey, I'm wiped tonight. That's not a break in the relationship. That's not, I'm offended by you. That is just, I really actually want to preserve this relationship.
Yeah.
And if I go out and resent you all night, that's not going to be helpful.
Yep.
So we want to sort of lower the temperature on both sides. We don't want to feel the need to say, no, I already told you 3 times I'm not going out.
That's
we don't
right.
want to get there. And we don't want to get to the part where somebody's saying, why not? You never go out. And then put that shame on you for getting you out. And all night you're just angry that you even came out and you're tired. And it's just not as fun.
Yeah. And what we've always tried to emphasize here at Honest Voice is that we all have the skills that we grew up with and what we saw modeled around us with people who were doing the best they could to give us the skills that we needed. But what we learned with those of us who grew up in households where, well, it's not polite to say that thing, or it's just easier to tell this little white lie to get out of something I don't want to do, then that's where the lie becomes the default. And we're not given the skill base we need to recognize that the truth is much more respectful. And if it makes something a little more uncomfortable in the moment, usually that moment passes, and then trust is built when we realize that when I ask you a question, you're going to give me the honest truth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One thing we really want to stress with that is that's where true relationships are built. We talked about this in our dating book, is that if you're putting on a facade when you're meeting somebody who has a facade or has a set of rules that they created because of somebody else that hurt them, then there's so much of a mismatch in communication that two people end up not connecting and they don't even know each other.
Yeah, you haven't even met yet.
Exactly. It's not the people that they're being exposed to. So this is where a lot of our motivation came from, putting this information out, writing it in books, doing this podcast now, and our audio podcast. But the one thing is, all of this stuff that we're talking about we want to change is socially acceptable because it's become so normalized. And what happens when it becomes so normalized is it trains a muscle, an intellectual muscle, and it becomes a skill. Skill isn't always good. And I've actually had people agree with me about the behavior being dysfunctional or being problematic, and then turn around and say, but I've been doing this for 20 years, so you don't tell me. And it's very interesting. But the main thing is that it trains us and it becomes a habit. And over the years, that muscle becomes a skill.
So what we find is that people stop being able to even look for an honest answer, even when they want to, because we've gotten so trained up at the white lies that I just want to escape this moment and I'm just going to lean on what's more comfortable for me instead of taking a chance and telling the truth.
Yeah, and that's exactly where Honest Voice basically came about, is that we don't even realize we're doing it anymore.
No.
It has become a form of our communication, but the thing that made us want to keep promoting this material is the perpetuating this kind of common lying, common avoidance, common protection.
Softening, all the words.
All of those things has made our communication not even real communication.
Yeah.
I've gotten to a point now, like I had this situation where I had a supervisor for a very short time that would just lie. And it got to the point with me where I was just like, what's the point in talking at all if you're just going to lie to me? Because the whole purpose of communication is exchanging ideas. So if you're going to tell me a lie, then there's no reason for us to continue talking. And of course, that relationship did not last very long.
Yeah. So I want to take just a minute and talk to my people-pleasing folks out there, because this is something that I struggle with. In a lot of moments to preserve relationships, I have wanted to do exactly the things we've been talking about. Use an excuse to get out of a social commitment, or give a softer lie rather than what my brain perceives as a harder truth, because I'm so focused on not making someone in front of me unhappy. So we're going to be learning together and practicing together, because what I've found is that the people closest to me, with whom I have no problem telling the whole truth all the time, those are the relationships that are most valuable, most secure, and the healthiest.
See, and that's a big point. And a lot of people don't like when I say this, and we've written it in the books, is that when you are dealing with this situation over and over again, for sometimes years, sometimes even decades, some people stay in relationships, like in marriages and things like that, where this kind of dysfunction is going on. But we try to tell you, please consider that your pain should reevaluate the relationship. Maybe this is not a good relationship for you.
So why is the goal to stay in a relationship versus having a healthy relationship? Isn't that exactly the same as I've been doing it 20 years?
Exactly.
Yeah, but you haven't been using the right skills, so you've been doing it incorrectly for 20 years. Why is the endurance the thing we're focusing on instead of the health of the relationship?
Exactly.
Right.
We are not the people that are sitting here saying, well, if you just stay in a relationship, you're wasting your life and you need to change that. We are not like that. We understand that every avenue for change is very, very difficult. I really want our audience to know that we are not above anything. A lot of this stuff, except for the brutality kind of things, we've engaged in ourselves when it comes to the communication aspects.
Yeah, absolutely right. We can talk so comfortably about this because in a lot of cases we've been here, we've been in those kind of relationships, we have made these kind of choices to tell a soft lie rather than an uncomfortable truth, and we've seen the impact on our relationship when we've pivoted those old habits, which is why we want to share it with you guys.
So our next bucket is the lies we tell to avoid a reaction, and we actually sort of touched on that already. We've talked about the posturing. Remember the posturing?
Any opportunity. It's so scary.
I just don't know how to do that very well. So one of the things that we talk about with these trying to avoid the reactions is something I actually have to deal with a lot. And I've gotten better. I've already disclosed that I'm on the spectrum, so I have a tendency to just give facts sometimes. I have a tendency to blurt, as I call it. I don't want to be blunt. I don't want to be perceived as blunt because I don't really think that's a virtue. I think the best way to communicate is what we should all be doing. Like I've said before, and I don't want to wear this out, is I've said that the best communicators are the ones that take responsibility for the entire exchange. The ones that not only are concerned about how they're putting it out, but also the ones who are concerned about the way it is received. I think that's really important. A lot of people don't do that. Like we've said before, the people are like, I'm not trying to be rude, but yes, you are.
That's true. That's very true.
Don't say that out loud.
No, I think that's just asking for permission to be rude, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a lie.
That's right.
So, they're already trying to cover it up. So when someone in your life, you already know that they have trouble receiving what we call hard information. And I also want to stress that it's only hard information because socially we've made it that way. Like I said with our mini robot example earlier, it's just data, but we have all turned in this, I don't think I like the way that sounds, or that offends me. You know, that's a choice in that moment, and that has to do with certain things that you're either filtering through or you haven't learned to cope with yet. But the thing that we do, back to the original point, is that we soften that up because we're concerned about the reaction of somebody else. And that's, I think we really need to work harder on saying, look, I want to be able to tell you the truth, but I can see, and this is expression, this doesn't have to be just words coming out. This can be like, hey, I don't want to go out with you tonight. And they're like, yeah, exactly. It doesn't have, I mean, it's expressions. That was a very good
Did you like that?
Yes, I did. It can be your facial expressions. It can be body language, gestures, all those kind of things. Those are the kind of things that are still indicating that you're bothered by it and you're not taking it in as data. So the person who is getting escalated, it's not a character flaw on their part. It's a survival adaptation. They have learned to be assertive in some capacities. Of course, it's not a healthy assertion in some cases, but this is how they have pressed their point when it has been important. Like, I need you to listen to me. So what happened at one time is that somebody wouldn't listen and they got escalated, and then it became a habit. It's
That's right.
Now, in order to get my point across, I feel like I need to get escalated. We say this about our clients that have serious mental illness, you know, that they have a deficiency in coping skills. So a lot of people new to the mental health fields, they perceive it as anger, but really it's just a deficiency in coping skills, because what they have learned is that they've been disenfranchised, they've been ignored, but they know that when they elevate, they get listened to.
They'll get their needs met.
Yeah, exactly. They get their needs met. So this has become a habit. So it's not malicious. It's not something that we want you to call out people's behavior. And we definitely don't want you to go, well, if you're just going to get angry, then I'm not even going to talk. You know, that is not bridging that gap. That is not bridging communication. That's just keeping it going.
So I think we can all picture someone in our lives that has that big reaction when we tell them something they don't want to hear. And as Todd said, this is not a criticism. It is a survival skill for folks who's maybe for whatever reason just have a hard time hearing truths they'd rather not hear, hearing bad information. So they've, without even realizing it, they've created this persona. And so it's harder for people to tell them the truth.
Well, if I may interject, you know, a lot of that comes from being told the truth in a very harsh way.
That's true.
You know, if you were brought up as a kid that was yelled at, like I have, like every directive was yelling.
Yeah.
And I remember even at a very young age, like 6 years old, I remember saying to one of my parents, you know, you don't have to yell all the time. You can sometimes just ask me. But looking back now, I can see that when certain things get repetitive and you're not having the coping skills and the communication skills that we have learned about, especially further back, you know, 70s and 80s kind of thing, they had this put on them where this is the way you handle things.
Right.
You know? And if you disobey me, then that means you don't respect me.
That's right.
Even though for kids, forgetting is a very real thing.
It is.
You know,
it is.
One thing I want to put out there right now, you cannot shame anybody or coerce anybody into remembering something. That is something that is part of our brains. It just happens. Information moves into other pockets that we can't access at the moment. And the only way you're going to get somebody to remember is to teach them how. Teach them mnemonic skills. Okay, when you do this, maybe that'll help you remember this. And you keep working on that collectively, but you can never make somebody feel bad about forgetting and correct that issue in your relationship.
It won't fix it.
And it's really common.
Yeah. So we will delve a lot more deeply into these buckets in our second episode, but I do want to speak for just a moment on the concept of prep when you're talking to somebody who can be reactive when you talk to them. We believe a lot in the pause here at Honest Voice, you know, that pause before you deliver information, and a little bit of prep before a conversation that you think might be uncomfortable can help to lower the defenses before you even get started. So we'll go more into that later, but that's one tool that we've discovered is really helpful when you're talking to folks who tend to be reactive to certain topics.
Yeah, and I also want to divulge, we talked about the basic anger before. So you all that are explosive when it comes to receiving information that you don't like. Remember that you are training and creating a bigger gap in your relationship, because you are basically coercing that person into silence.
Yeah.
That is how it will be adopted based on the level of your explosion, your basic reaction. The louder you are, the more you will provoke them to conceal this information. It will not change the behaviors around it. I guarantee that. It never works that way. I know for a fact, like I said, I've got the trauma memories. I've got the trauma response. I remember things very clearly that happened to me when I was 5, when I was 8. I mean, if they were impactful enough, they are a memory burned in. And I know for a fact that based on my entire environment, that it made me more apt to try to hide things. Like it actually stretched it out to where I thought that I could do it and it would make me happy in the moment, even though I knew I wasn't supposed to. I almost was forcing myself to be doing something that I shouldn't be doing just to have that ownership.
Yeah.
Because everything else I'm basically getting beaten down for in my household. So
Right.
I remember very clearly not learning from any of that stuff and even wanting to be more mischievous in some cases just to get that autonomy, depending upon what my age level
Just to have some control, some perceived control over your life, some power in your life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. So what's actually happening when you avoid telling the truth to someone who's been reactive in the past is that it looks like dishonesty from the outside. You're failing to give information. So from a very concrete standpoint, you're being dishonest. That's what it looks like. From the inside, what you're doing is protecting yourself. You don't want to have conflict. You don't want to have an uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah. And this applies really for larger peer groups. Like when you're in a group and you say you've got a really close friend and then you've got your acquaintances, you're all good friends. But when that close friend sees you trying to protect yourself, what they see is you lying to that person, you know? And if they don't understand the dynamics, that's when you get hit with that pressure of, why didn't you just speak up for yourself?
Yes.
Why didn't you just tell the truth? Why do you keep letting them walk all over you like that? And that type of input doesn't help the person who is defending themselves or trying to maintain a comfortable environment for everybody involved. That's one of the things where we talk about variables in context. The group setting is never a time to confront something.
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah. So what I would tell my friend who's actually coercing me at the moment and shaming me about not doing this, I would tell them, hey, I'm not going to do that in an open forum with other people around, because it's just going to embarrass the other person and it will damage the relationship.
Yep.
And this kind of stuff is not damaging enough that I'm ready to reevaluate it. I want to stay in this relationship, so I am going to talk to them offline, and I'll let you know what happened then.
Yeah. I feel like we need a t-shirt that says on it just context and variables.
Yeah.
Because that just plays so much of a part in all these communication skills. It's all about context. It's all about variables.
Yeah, and I've frustrated a lot of close friends. They've come to me and it's like, you know, this and this and this is happening and this is happening, and then I yell back and then she yells, and what do you think? And I'll be like, I don't have enough information actually to tell you what I think. First of all, I don't know what kind of bias you're giving me.
Exactly.
You know, I don't know. I don't know what actually was
hearing
said.
one side of this. Yeah.
Exactly. And I get a lot of our friends get frustrated with me for that, because I'm like, I'm not ready to commit to this response until I am living in your living room while this is going on next time, so I can actually see what's going on.
Exactly.
So back to that original scenario. I don't want my close friend to think I'm a liar. Integrity is a big deal to us. We always want to be perceived as honest because we are honest. Basically, we don't want to ruin this relationship by looking like a liar. And we also don't want to destroy that relationship with honesty that's not ready to be received.
Yes.
Because
true.
like I said, we have to be concerned about the receptivity. You know, is it true? Is it necessary?
Is it kind? Yep.
Is that person receptive? And sometimes that receptivity is not about whether or not they're receptive. It has to do with the climate in the moment.
That's right.
Is this even a good time for them to receive this information? Because that's incredibly different, especially as crisis intervention specialists. You know, we know that sometimes moving a person away from a situation is much easier to communicate with them than trying to talk to them when other people are around.
Yeah.
It's a completely different dynamic. So you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, this is going to be a 2-part episode, so we're not going to delve into all of the nitty gritty today, if that's still a phrase people understand in 2026.
Look it up.
So let's talk a little bit about the next bucket, which is what we conceal from children about the world. It's such a big priority for parents to protect kiddos as long as possible. And those of us who are adults in this world know that there's a lot of not so pretty stuff out there, and we want to do our best to keep our children safe. But there's a line between protecting them from negative information and finding a way to deliver what we call an age appropriate or G or PG rated version of some truths that they will need to understand to be safe in the world.
Yeah, and this came out from our research and also from my personal experiences.
Yeah.
I know for a fact, and I could feel it into my early 20s and 30s, I felt very immature around my peers. And that's because I had very young parents in their teens when I was born. And then I have a sister. She came along a year and a half after. So this is two teenagers trying to raise two kids, you know, which is very problematic. But just from the educational standpoint, they didn't have any background in their learning. Their backgrounds were probably similar, of course, to what I was seeing because that's what they were taught.
Yeah. Yep.
So the abuse that I endured was also abuse they endured.
Yeah.
You know, and I could see that in retrospect. But the idea at that age is to protect and conceal. But unfortunately, that concealment made me very ignorant. And it did not allow me to have any kind of coping skills when dealing with my peers
Right.
in an unguarded environment. And that's what I think, this is our opinion from Honest Voice,
Yeah.
that there should be some level of preparation for adulthood. Being protected without any kind of context made me very ignorant.
Yeah.
So I had no idea what was going on in the real world because you don't need to know about that ugliness out there. You know, but what if I'm exposed to that ugliness? You want these kids to be competent enough to handle themselves in your absence,
Yes.
which is a lot of the day. So you need to think about these things that what are they capable of handling that's going on in the world at their age? What in the news that kids their age are dealing with that even though you don't think it's going to happen to you, it's not going to happen in your community, what should they know in those situations? They engage instead of panic.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, how many TV shows, movies, even news articles have you heard of? There was that one kid that led all the other kids out of the room, or there was that one kid that said, stay calm. Those are the kind of things you want them to know.
Yeah.
And there's a way to do that. We get the protection angle. It's like,
Sure.
well, I don't want them to think there's nothing but monsters out there. The unfortunate reality is that there are monsters out there.
There are.
And it's more important to let them know what to do. And there are ways, especially like with AI right now, you can ask, what's an age appropriate way to present this to my 8-year-old?
Exactly.
About how do I talk to them about kidnappers or school shootings, things like that, things
Yeah.
that are in the news every day. Instead of turning the news off when they come into the room and say, you don't need to worry about that. That's adult stuff.
Parents do our best to try to shield our kiddos from ugly things, but as Todd mentioned, kids spend most of their days outside the house with peers and other people, and not every parent chooses the same path of protection. So what we don't want is our kids getting the wrong information from other children who may have learned the wrong things from someone else.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah. We may elect not to share something with our children because we think they're too young to understand it. But especially in 2026 and beyond, information is everywhere. It's on their tablets, it's on our phones, the TVs, it's in schools, it's everywhere. So if we give them the message that we're not going to talk about it with them, then we've set up a barrier to being able to help them the way we want to and have an open discussion at an age appropriate level so that they at least have an understanding and a deeper message that if something scary or confusing is going on, my parents will talk to me about it and they'll answer my questions. Because the barrier is that if we don't find an age appropriate way to share these things with our kids, then they have the feeling that we're not going to be honest with them about hard things. And
That's true.
they then have to put the pieces together in a way that might not be correct and might put them in a dangerous situation.
Exactly. So this is where the phrase out of sight, out of mind is actually damaging. I mean, a lot of times we say that as a protective measure, but it's actually damaging because one thing you have to keep in mind, the kid may still have to deal with that and you may not be there.
That's
so
true.
What do you want? Do you want them to be aware of a situation that you can assure them that they have ways to protect themselves and they know to go to adult or contact a policeman or dial 911 in that case? Or do you want them to be faced with that situation where they have absolutely no idea what to do in that moment and they panic and melt down?
And you experienced that a lot growing up, just not knowing how to handle situations.
I did. Yeah, I had a lot of very severe bullying situations, you know, and of course the standard is to ignore them, but I have to tell you, hopefully in this day and age that is understood as not the remedy. Ignoring them makes it worse. I'm going to tell adults right now.
100%.
Yeah, kids will dig in and they will find a way. If they see that you're ignoring them in some capacity, they will find more creative ways to pop up out of nowhere.
They just take it as a challenge.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we've talked about some of the common things that parents do to try to shield their children. Turning off the TV when stressful news or scary news comes on. dismissing a topic by saying, oh, that's just grown-up stuff. You don't have to worry about that. Refusing to identify a hard situation that's just happened and actually completely avoiding a question that a child has asked you. And what we know is that all that does is limit their ability to cope with hard things and block them from asking you questions if they think you're not going to be honest with them. So what are some alternatives?
Yeah, exactly. And there were words in my house that I wasn't allowed to say. And interestingly enough, like hate and ugly, like we don't say hate and we don't say ugly. And it's like, those are like the two main things going on in my house.
I was going to say that's really interesting.
Yeah, it was really odd. So it was like, we don't say ugly. And it's not even in context. Not like we don't call other people ugly. We just don't say those words. So it was very confusing and also very funny, of course, when my peers would say hate or ugly. I'd be like, oh. Yeah.
So we don't say ugly here. We just act ugly.
Yeah,
so,
we just act ugly and we act hateful.
Awesome. But we don't say it. Don't say it.
We don't say it. So those kind of things, actually, as I've said, I remember those things. And I also see the damage in retrospect after educating myself in this kind of communication styles and child development and the mental health education and the psychology education that we've had. I see in retrospect where those things basically degraded my growth.
Yeah. So instead of avoiding hard topics altogether, as Todd has mentioned in previous episodes, we really love the idea of a PG version. Share what you can. Yes, there's a war going on right now. Here's what people are fighting over. It's stressful. Do you have any questions about it? Just give them a PG version. We don't have to go into the whole ugly truth, whatever it is.
That's going to be very helpful in school also because you have world history and you have U.S. history, and they're going to be talking about war. So giving them more context and understanding just allows them to become more educated and more knowledgeable on the information that they're going to be getting in school.
Another alternative is to just name the thing that has happened, and not only name the event, but how common is it and what do people do in these unfortunate situations that helps them cope with it.
Yeah, I had to use that with our son once again back in the day. You're not his biological mom.
Right.
So when I went through the divorce, I had to explain that to 5-year-old son. Yeah, maybe 4 or 5-year-old. And what I use as an analogy is that sometimes people just don't get along. And I related back to him. I said, how many of your friends were friends, but then you're not really friends anymore?
Yeah.
Something happened and it wore down the relationship, or you don't talk as much as you used to. You're not as close as you used to be. Those things happen in normal life. And that basically happened with me and your mom. So that was the way I explained it. That was the G version of this whole situation, is that people don't stay together. And the research supports this. People who stay together for the sake of the relationship, I just got to put this out there right now. You're hurting your kids more than you're helping them by superficially staying in a relationship that you're not happy in.
Yeah.
Because you're doing two things. Is one, you're basically showing an environment that is obviously superficial and false.
Yes.
And they will detect that. Secondly, because of all that, you are teaching them what a relationship should look like. There's a lot of commonality for people that were in abusive relationships and allowed it to go on and did not fix those relationships, that their children, when they grow up, be teens, they seek out similar people because
That's true.
There's a certain psychological context to familiarity. When we don't really measure good or bad sometimes with familiarity, just our body feels that we know this.
Yes.
So we gravitate. It's like, I think that's where that common phrase, the devil you know.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you'd rather stick with the devil you know than try something new and not know anything about it. A lot of that comes from just that basic familiarity. So if you are in those kind of toxic relationships and you're trying to stay together for the sake of the kids, you're actually harming them, and you're harming yourself as well. People who are not compatible anymore over time should not be forcing themselves to stay in those toxic environments. They should be, I mean, life is linear. So if you're wasting that portion of your life, that's not a great example that you would want your kids to endure. I mean, it's just something to think about.
It's true. So I'm glad you used that example about not staying together for the kids, because one thing we do know about children is that they are incredibly perceptive. You know, as our brains grow, a lot of our childhood, we don't understand a lot of really complex concepts. So kids tend to interpret through feelings and things that don't really have words to them yet. It's just, I know that something's not right here. So when we hurry up and turn off the TV instead of talking about something uncomfortable, kids notice that. They don't just notice that the TV's off and you're not giving the information, but they attach feelings to it. Oh, this is bad. I shouldn't ask questions, or I
Not
should
just
know
that,
those things.
concealment.
Yes.
So
yes.
keep secrets.
Yes, exactly.
Which is an interesting paradox, which I think we're getting to, actually.
Yeah, I think it's right there if you want to go ahead.
Okay, which is an interesting paradox that a lot of these things become very confusing. So take, for instance, the situation where we conceal private information. That's family stuff. We don't talk about that. But then when a child perceives you as gossiping, now you're doing the exact opposite. So that becomes very confusing. So when you're talking about personal issues about somebody else, but now you're making it okay to talk about something like that. But also, additionally, when you're talking about that concealment, it can become confusing because we don't talk about personal information, but also realistically, we were mental health case managers. We had to deal with situations of child abuse. And that was the most common factor, is that an abusive adult with a child will say, you don't talk about family issues outside, which prevents that victim from seeking help.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So it's very paradoxical when it comes to communication, but the main thing is arm your kid with as much information that's age appropriate.
Yeah.
To be aware, to protect themselves, but also because of this paradoxical thing, I would also give them some basic understanding that they should not share that information with their peers, because that's something that parents should be telling the kids. It's not their place to educate another child, because that can become really problematic also.
Yeah. And another benefit to sharing openly on an age appropriate level about scary situations is that you can help give your children skills and know how to respond if they're ever in that situation themselves. So for example, there's a movie on TV that has a child who gets kidnapped. And of course, we don't want to expose a child to something scary like watching a child get taken from their home. But isn't this also an opportunity to say, there are some bad people in the world who want to do bad things. And if this ever happens to you, here's how I want you to protect yourself. We now have an opportunity to do a little education so that if our children, hopefully never happens, but if they're in that situation where the very stereotypical grown up with candy in a van, then they know what to do about that, because we've had an age appropriate conversation about what this is, how often it happens, and how you can help yourself.
Yeah, we can say it's rare, but it does happen.
Yeah.
So be prepared. You don't need to be terrified.
Exactly.
But be prepared if that kind of stuff happens. So the main thing is the child walks away with awareness, and also they understand that how valuable the truth is.
Yes.
Tell the truth. Don't try to conceal it. The main point we're making, that we've probably exhausted, is that it's better to have a child that walks away from a conversation with awareness rather than an adult who has no idea how to handle a situation that's similar, or an older kid or a teenager who has never been basically indoctrinated into reality that they could possibly face.
Yeah. So the last bucket we'll talk about today, still talking about communication with children, this one more specifically about the truth we don't tell our kiddos about themselves. It feels like love to just shower your child with positive things and not to bring up things that might make them sad. But it's also withholding. And what we know about all relationships all the time is that we're always modeling behavior. Every time we make a choice with what we share, what we don't share, our body language, all the things, we're modeling how other people should be acting. And when we choose not to tell people things about themselves they can improve upon, we don't help them build coping skills, and we don't help them learn that it's helpful to have other people's feedback so that we can grow.
Yeah, I think this is like a big problem right now. I'm reading a lot of teachers' responses that kids break down when they break a lead pencil or something like that, or if they can't find something. They have absolutely no coping skills, and a lot of that comes from never dealing with strife, but like the everyone gets a trophy thing and the avoidance of any kind of correction when a skill has failed or did not pan out the way that they expected it to. They are losing the ability to deal with when things go wrong. Everybody gets a trophy, and telling a kid that he's the greatest kid ever, even when he's a bully or making mistakes or provoking other kids, this becomes the adult that loses their temper with somebody who confronts an actual realistic error that they've made. Like if it's a boss, and someone tries to tell them, this is the kid that is going to scream back at somebody or not pay any attention to what their staff is trying to tell them to protect them because they're not aware that their behavior is problematic.
Yeah. None of us are good at every single thing we try to do. And the earlier we can get that message across, the easier it will be for kids to receive honest feedback from other adults, teachers, counselors, coaches. Maybe your kid excels at English but struggles with math. And if their math teacher is the first person to ever give them feedback that isn't glowing, it could be crushing for them. So we encourage families to use the family setting as a safe place to start practicing truth and honesty, and not even necessarily criticism, just a little correction or encouragement on things that we need to improve.
There has to be learning on how to lose. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
This is something that's being highly neglected in this day and age. Kids and a lot of adults that we're encountering, young adults, they do not know how to receive any kind of correction whatsoever.
It's so true.
And they are completely unprepared for like the work environment because that has a certain structure. It has policies. It has rules. Sometimes those rules are, don't do that thing you do at home that seems okay.
Yeah.
And that is the rule. And they have a hard time. I mean, you're dealing with that as a I'm retired right now, so I don't have to deal with things like this anymore, but you have been exposed to that or witnessed it in some capacity. So this comes directly from their childhood where they were not taught effective coping skills to learn that correction is data.
Yeah.
And improvement is beneficial.
Yep.
We see this in older adults. Like we had a supervisor for a while that you could not tell them anything because even saying something like, we could do this even better if we did this was immediately taken as, oh, so you're trying to say my way was wrong.
Yeah.
And no, we can keep doing it your crappy way. And that's fine. It is passable.
Yes.
But there is a more beneficial way of doing it. And of course, I didn't say any of that.
But we thought it. We definitely thought it.
Yeah, because I mean, that's basically what that person was provoking. But like we've said in previous episodes, ultimately, nobody provided any input at all because it was too chaotic or explosive.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The act of avoiding criticizing or even critiquing our children comes from a good place. We want to encourage them, wrap them up in love and all the happy things, and we want to build them up. But when we don't let them practice at home with hearing, oh, you could have done this part a little better, or let's practice that again, that wasn't quite right, then we lead them to believe that all negative feedback is this soul-crushing, character-identifying failure language. So then they lose the ability to hear feedback from a teacher or a coach or a counselor about something that they could do to improve their grades or a certain motor skill or something else.
Yeah, actually, I'm thinking like in the evolution of all of this, if we don't change it, eventually it's going to get to a point where like somebody starts driving down a road that says do not go this way, and they'll be like, you don't tell me.
That's right.
Yeah, this is the way I want to go. And then they get into an accident, because I think we're heading toward that, where people
Scary,
are just
but true.
Completely not have the coping skills, so completely dismiss what somebody's trying to provide for them.
Yeah. So this is our opportunity to help our kids understand that none of us know how to do everything perfectly the first time. That's just not something we should ever expect from ourselves. But if we get comfortable with giving good, healthy feedback and helping our children improve on whatever it is where they're struggling, then the first time a coach tells them, man, you completely screwed that play, what were you thinking? They won't melt down. They won't have a complete breakdown about it.
Be like, okay, how can I fix it, coach?
Yeah. What do you need me to do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And really, when you get down to it, you're distorting their reality.
It's true.
I mean,
it's very true.
There are times where we've said, and not in jest, that this person is having a very difficult time dealing with reality. They've had so much affirmation, even for the things that were not so great or problematic even, that they don't know what it means to be improved upon or corrected or a better way or anything. They're just very stuck in their own bubble.
Yeah.
And they don't get any new education where they will be more successful. I myself would have probably been a victim of that if I hadn't gone into the Navy, right away.
Yeah.
If I wouldn't have had that redirection and now learning structure and now learning respect and now learning even the praise. The first time I was praised for doing something right, it felt euphoric. I mean,
bet.
It was, the mentality of the 50s, 60s, 70s is don't compliment your child because it'll go to their head.
That's right.
Is not how it works. What happens, and just to help you, if you see it going to their head, then you correct that. And that's sort of what we're talking about right now.
Exactly.
And you say, okay, you don't want to get arrogant about this. You can win or lose. So let's talk about how we handle that as well. So you can see how those affirmations, unrealistic affirmations, can hurt rather than help.
All right. So rather than avoiding giving any kind of feedback or critiques to our children, what we want to do is try to focus on what was positive about their efforts. Because if they're trying something new, we definitely want to encourage kids to try new things. And so it's a natural thing to just say, that was a really strong effort. You did a really good job trying to build that table from the instructions that you had. And here's what could have strengthened that effort. Here's what you could do a little bit different next time to make it more successful or more efficient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and you can give realistic feedback about the situation if there is some disappointment, because we're not saying eliminate all disappointment.
Right.
You
No,
know,
definitely not.
help them deal with that as well.
Yeah.
Say it's a choice to be disappointed. No, I'm just kidding. That's my catch-all for everything.
We do enjoy it's a choice.
Yeah. Don't say that one. Just say, you know, I really see how hard you worked on that. And it didn't turn out the way you expected, but here's your next step. Here's what we could try after this. You want your child to be seen accurately, and you want them to understand that being seen accurately is not an insult, even when there's like negative words
Absolutely.
peppered in there. Those are the things that you want them to build those coping skills. Like I said, you don't want to hide things from them. You want them to build stronger communication skills that they're not measuring every word like people are doing today.
Yeah.
Like it is, I have made extremely positive post responses and had somebody take it completely out of context.
Yes, you have.
Yeah, and I'm just going to put it out there now. I'm not trying to sound blunt or dismissive or anything like that, but if you come out of our podcasts or our responses and you say, you're making it sound like we're not. That's the interpretation that you're taking our words in, because we work very hard to try to keep this as emotion reducing as possible, because that is, and I don't even know if that was good grammar. We may not have a lot of words, but the words we have, we know how to use really well. That's what
Good job.
That's what Honest Voice is working on here. Not the most intellectual vocabulary, but what we do have, we use very well.
Yes, we do.
So
that's right.
That's the whole thing. But making sure that they understand being seen accurately does not make it something that is ugly. That goes back to that concealment thing. We don't want to hide things. We want to be comfortable with them being in the light. There are certain things about our private lives that you wouldn't like it being exposed, but if I'm telling it, I'm pretty comfortable if it gets exposed, even if somebody tries to say, well, you know, that was stupid, or you must have looked like an idiot. It's like, well, that's your opinion. You know? I think the ultimate going with the super person again is basically all of our information could be out there and nobody could hurt us with it, because we have the coping skills that they couldn't use that against us.
Yeah, and honest communication is really the key to those strong coping skills. And it's really just never too early to try to speak honestly from an age appropriate standpoint, wanting to make sure our kids know we don't expect perfection. None of us are perfect. And the more comfortable we can get with honest feedback about our strengths, our limitations, even our weaknesses, the easier it will be for us to accept those from other people, and the easier it will be to be honest overall.
Yeah, remember, like we keep saying, the reason things are called hard conversations is because we've made it that way.
Yeah.
And one thing that's really interesting when you get into the research is that you think that inflated praise, or we're telling them they're great when they're not, and harsh criticism are opposites. They're not. They're both problematic communication styles that damage the child, because it gives them, first of all, the inflated praise, like we've said, gives them an unrealistic perspective about their abilities. So they don't try to improve. They don't try to aspire. They won't know what that means to aspire to something higher, because you've already said they're the best. And they don't need to do it anymore. And harsh criticism just provides shame that usually we internalize, and it feels like an insult to ourselves. So both of those are damaging.
They are.
I'd almost say equally damaging.
I agree with that.
So the people that do this inflated praise, they're saying, well, at least I'm not harshly criticizing. Well, it's just as bad.
It
is.
is.
Keep that in mind.
It is. So really what we're searching for here is a middle ground between praising every single thing our kids do and criticizing every single thing they do, which is coming from an honest middle ground. We want to share when things are working well. We want to be able to give feedback when things aren't working well. And we want to be honest with our kids so that they can build a realistic self-image and be open and receptive to feedback.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in wrapping up here, one of the things we just want you to remember, these are things that don't make anybody a bad parent. You know,
Right.
We've already talked about coping. We've talked about self-awareness. We talked about how the pandemic degraded where we are now. There is an interruption in our developmental process. There is a social interruption in our progression in learning these skills. We are a little behind because we were isolated. And for some kids that were isolated during certain developmental moments, it's very damaging.
It is.
So we're not saying your kid is inept or dysfunctional. We're just saying that the social events that have taken place around them has impacted them in some way.
Yeah.
And we have to recognize that.
We do.
Can't just bury our heads in the sand
Nope.
and go on like things are normal. We're seeing it. Teachers are seeing it. Mental health professionals are seeing it. Basically, the bottom line is the mental health professionals are seeing the adults that were being affected as kids. And we're trying to interrupt this before it gets to that point is what our big crusade is.
Absolutely
right now.
right.
It's teaching you to help your kids break this cycle of ultimately needing therapy when we're adults. Not saying therapy's bad, but I'm just saying creating just a dysfunctional lifestyle that we perpetuate through our social interactions that ultimately leads to pain.
Yeah. Parents today just have a little bit more work that they have to do to try to make up for an unavoidable pause in development that happened during the pandemic.
Exactly.
So we talked a lot about honesty and lies specifically in a lot of different places. So for a little bit of reflection this week, we want to think about where in your life you're telling a small lie because you don't quite have the language for the truth or you don't feel comfortable to share the truth. You don't have to do anything different just for this week. Just think about that. Where is that showing up in your life?
Yeah, and where in your relationships has at one time you were telling the truth, but now you've stopped because
That's a good one.
Your partner has become explosive or problematic or just won't discuss anything.
So what in your house growing up were you not able to talk about? It's another kind of question to ask yourself. And what did the absence of that information teach you?
When I shared with everybody here, I can see the degradation in my maturity development looking back. And there's still remnants. When I am around even somebody that's younger than me and they're in a position of authority, I sometimes feel like the kid in that situation.
I know
like,
that
I don't
feeling.
know if they're going to like me and it all comes from the way I developed as a child and what was put in here and where it evolved as an adult.
And then the last reflection question we have is, when you praise the people in your life, are you telling them what is true or are you telling them what is easy? Just reflecting on that helps us tease out the differences so we know how to change that if we need to be more honest.
And there are a lot of ways to pick out information to be honest.
Yes.
And you don't always even have to answer the exact question that they're giving, just like we gave the example earlier.
With the dress.
Yeah, what do you
Yeah.
think of this dress? Well, I think the blue one looks better. That's honest.
It is.
The blue one does look better. That kind of thing. And this isn't a real scenario. This
This is hypothetical.
Carolsue's not going to go put on her blue dress now and be like, well, you liked it.
The grandma sweater is a real scenario,
Yeah,
but the
grandma
blue dress
sweater,
not so much.
Yeah.
All right, and then some practicing.
Here we go.
All right, so I want you to pick one small lie this week that you would normally tell on autopilot and try the honest version instead. Not brutal, just clear.
Yeah, and notice what happens. Use some of our skills too, since this is a change in behavior and you've created a dynamic with the people in your life, you're going to have to modify that dynamic now. So some of the tools that we've told you in previous episodes, prep. This is a new tool that you might want to use just specifically for this particular style. Now say, look, I'm about to tell you something that usually I can see that it bothers you a little bit. So I need you to bear with me because I need to talk to you about that.
Yes.
So create that environment where it's going to be safe for both of you now to discuss something that you wouldn't normally discuss.
Perfect. So what we bet will happen when you try to be more honest is that the big scary thing that we all keep in our heads that, oh man, if I tell her this, she's going to flip out. Hopefully it won't happen. But with a little bit of prep work, as we're suggesting, you can create the best situation for a good, honest conversation.
You can go the whole route and create the environment and say, I am watching this crazy podcast right now, so I'm trying to try these new skills. So like give them this whole prep and now it becomes a collaboration.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're not just telling an individual one thing, but you're asking them to go ahead and engage with intellectual conversation and honest conversation, real conversation.
Now they're helping you.
Exactly.
So that increases the buy-in from them.
Right. And
Yeah.
you're both modeling the change of not reacting to information that you have interpreted as being something you don't like to hear in that moment.
Exactly.
So most of the examples that we talked about in this episode, these are soft lies. These are minor lies.
Yeah.
They're not anything that we're calling anybody out on. These are lies that people don't even classify as lies.
That's
You know,
true.
in the moment, you don't even think that I'm telling something dishonest in this moment. So it's just something to think about. And remember, prior to that, the reason you did lie was because of kindness. You
Yeah.
were trying to soften it for somebody. You were trying to protect yourself. You were trying, in some case, you were doing something positive. But we really want to get away from that because, like we say, we think it's perpetuating the social breakdown in communication. You know,
Yeah.
it sounds lofty and worldly, but we see it
We do.
all the time.
And with any relationship that we're going to have with someone for a long period of time, whether it's a friend, family member, coworker, if we avoid telling the truth, all we're really doing is delaying a conversation that we're probably going to have down the road. So we think we're protecting somebody, but really we're just prolonging a dishonest interaction where we could start being kind and honest at the same time and come to a more secure and more true, honest relationship with our kids, with our coworkers, with our spouses, with everybody. So avoiding it is really just a delay. We don't want to delay. We just want to start practicing telling the truth in a way that is respectful and kind, but open and honest.
Yeah, and we reinforce that in the cost of concealment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we talked about when silence is not helpful.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
so
right.
Practice these skills. Once again, we want to reinforce the fact that this is new.
It is.
We're pulling you out of the norm and we're asking you to do something a little different in order to ultimately model that to push back into the norm. Mm-hmm. That's where our whole goal is.
Yeah, exactly. It'll only become more comfortable once we start practicing it consistently. And once you do it as a norm, you'll be amazed at how much time it'll seem like you wasted by not just having more open conversations. But it's a new skill, and the best way to get stronger with it is just to practice it wherever we can. So we encourage you to do that this week.
Exactly. And lastly, I want to stress this to you that we are building on something. Mm-hmm. So we're going to get what people would call more controversial as we progress.
Yeah.
But once again, it's only controversial because socially we made it that way.
That's true.
We should be able to talk about all of this stuff without being worried about, aside from being damaging and insulting and offensive.
And cruel, right.
And cruel. We believe that a lot of our communication is stunted, and it creates barriers to connection because of all of these properties that we're trying to identify and offer alternatives.
Yes, exactly. So we do want to thank you for sticking with us today. We know this was kind of a big macro overview of white lies, soft lies, the little things that we do that impact our relationships and communication. And we look forward to talking with you next week when we'll go a little bit more micro and we'll talk about the specific ways that lies that we tell impact our relationships.
For some, it goes on for their whole lives.
It does.
Like they never realize how much it's impacted them to not be honest. And like I said earlier, we're building on something. We've taught you self-awareness. We're trying to teach about coping skills. We talked about anger and how that is provoked, hoping that people will work on that and not be offended by the data that we're providing right now. And now we're going into the lies in a macro version, then we're going to a more detailed version of lies, and then we're going to go into a more detailed version of anger. So we're actually trying to protect you and build these skills to where it will be more comfortable to accept this other information and consider it.
Exactly. So in the meantime, as always, if there's feedback you have for us, please feel free to reach out. Our email addresses are on the website. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if there's anything you think we missed, please share.
All right. Thanks for being on Honest Voice. I'm Todd.
I'm Carolsue. Have a great day.
Take care.